Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to your DSAT live lectures. Dear friends, today in international relations we will be talking about India-China relations. In that we will look at the evolution of relationship between India and China. We will also look at the issues and policies of China towards India and India's towards China. We will also look at the regional organizations and their policies pertaining to it. To discuss this topic, we have with us our subject expert, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Bhardwaj. Dr. Bhardwaj is professor in Center for South Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. Without further ado, I would like to welcome sir to our studios and request him to start the lecture. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much and very good afternoon. Today it's very important topic and subject before the academic community, before the students, and before the policy makers, and we all are very much involved in the issues related to India-China relations, and it is a big policy issue before the policy makers, that how to cope with rising China. Or rise of China in South Asia, rise of China in the world politics, and how to manage, how to get the support of China on many crucial issues like the membership of NSG and like the support for the terrorism, where India is suffering since last 6 to 7 decades. So we are looking supports from international communities, including China. So today I'm going to discuss about China-India relations and how it has evolved over the years. First of all, I would like to discuss the systemic pressure in making the foreign policy of India and China. So in fact there are three systemic pressure which influence, which shapes the foreign policy of a country: the domestic systemic pressure, regional systemic pressure, and international systemic pressure. So when we are talking about the domestic systemic pressure, of course it depends on the nature of the state, what type of state is there. If it is a democratic state like India, then certainly the different stakeholders, the people's representatives and civil society people, they have very significant, very crucial role to influence the foreign policy of a country or foreign policy of India with any country, including China. And when we are suppose there are issues related to environmental security, there are issues related to farmers' rights and farmers' interests in WTO and so there like we are negotiating with the international community, developed countries and developing countries, and the rising powers like China on issue of environment. So there we will take what kind of implications are on India and particularly on the issue of climate change and that how it is adversely impacting on the Indian environment. So we negotiate with China that why we do not come together to fight our rights, our interest with the developed countries, which they have developed themselves, and they are asking us to control our industrial developments, to asking. So this is one issue. Like second issue, when suppose you are purchasing chemicals and fertilizers and with the international market, and there the rule of laws and the WTO, and that impacts on the export import system. So there we negotiate, because we have to take care of the rights of the farmer, and farmers influence the government to frame a policy, negotiate with the international community which can protect their interest at home. So the systemic pressure, particularly domestic systemic pressure, is very important in case of India, because India is a democratic society. We have the largest functional democracy in the world, and different regions, different communities and religion and sects are presenting to the governments and the influence. And we also have the very strong federal system, like and there we are having like cooperative federal. We are trying to make it cooperative federalism, and so that the federal states also influence the foreign policy of India, particularly when we are dealing with China, we are dealing with the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, like Sri Lanka, like Pakistan. So it's very important to consider the interest of the federal units. Like in case of Bangladesh, we have to consider West Bengal. In case of Sri Lanka, we have to consider the interest of Tamil Nadu. And in case of China, so we have to consider the interest of the northeastern people, and all of course the neighboring countries' interests as well, like Bhutan and Nepal are important. The second very significant aspects of domestic systemic pressure comes from when we have like coalition politics, where coalition partners they influence the foreign policy because of their different ideological leanings. They some of them they are very comfortable developing relations with Americans. Some of them they are very comfortable developing relations with China. So there are left and there are rightist, and there are rightist to left, and from center to rightist forces. They are influencing the foreign policy of a state. Like if you are going with the public opinion in general, you are having and you are discussing that. Now these days, particularly the young generations, they are development lovers that who believes in profit maximization and who believes in better education, health services and all that. They prefer to have better economic engagements with the country who have the potential of investment, where China fits very well. And the other the conservative and traditional forces who do not believe on China, they believe, because they have the memories of 1962, and they believe that better we should distance from China. China is not a trusted country. So there are like about 40 to 45% people, they do not believe having better cordial relations with China. They are asking whether to contain China in the region, to cope with China, we should develop better strategic partnership with United States. So if in that perspective, the domestic systemic pressures I have discussed in case of India, but when you are going to China, China is not a democratic country. There is a one party system, and Communist Party of China, they dominates entire system. So they do not consider much public opinions, they do not consider much different stakeholders what they are looking for, and they are basically there is one single window system in making the policies with any country. So they do not have that kind of liberty, and they do not have go with the feedbacks of the people to formulate the policies. And however, that I have witnessed in case of China, like if you are going to different parts of China, like suppose you are in Beijing, so Beijing will have a policy orientations, like they will look overall scenario that how we can develop, how we can cooperate with the international communities on economic issues, on security issues. So that is a center of the policy. But when you are going to other places like Sangdu, you will see that people of Sangdu, they will talk moreover like developing closer relations with Afghanistan, with Central Asian countries, and they advocates about the new Silk Road policies and all that, because it benefits to them, and they through the Chinese Communist Party, through the party system, they try to send their opinion, but it is not open forum and open discussions for the people of China. But when you are coming to Kunming people, they talk differently. They are more emphasizing, like we must have heard about the BCIM, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor, and there they are looking, because Yunnan province, where Kunming situated, Yunnan province is a landlocked province and do not have easy access to sea, and what the nearest sea or any port is either in Chittagong or Kolkata. So they are more advocating that we should have better economic corridor through Myanmar, Bangladesh and India, and we can have easy access to Chittagong port. So that is also influence. They talked like this kind of clusters. They are influencing the Chinese policy. But again, I will say this is not open. This is basically within like Yunnan Academy of Social Science. They advise to the Chinese Academy of Social Science, and so this kind of chain of policy framework is very important in case of China. And then you are going to Shanghai. The people in Shanghai will talk about more about South China Sea and security perspective, security aspects and all that. They focus different issues, and all these different regional thinking, they take shape in from Beijing, and then they cooperate. So my point is here, but Chinese approach is from top-down approach, and in case of India, it's a bottom-up approach where the people's sentiments, people's interests had been given priority over the government and national nation state. In case of China happens. So this is the first aspects that I'm talking about, the domestic systemic pressure. When you come to the regional systemic pressure, of course it is very important that region defines and determines the policy of your neighboring states, like particularly when we are coming to China relations, India's relations with China, then South Asian countries are very crucial, very important factor, because China has very deep, very strong interest in the India's neighboring countries. Why so? Because there are three important aspects why China is having interest in neighboring countries. First is that the vulnerable territory of China, particularly Xinjiang and Tibet, are bordering to the South Asian states. So China is well aware if there is any immediate support is required to control any insurgency, any movements in Tibet and in Xinjiang province, they look support from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, and from Nepal. So they have the vulnerable territory, and to control any kind of unforeseen incidents in near future, if it happens, China is looking is looking South Asian countries very important. So China is slowly increasing its presence in the neighboring countries, and have impacts on India-China relations because of the regional systemic pressure. Second thing, that China also have very deep interest, because if you're looking, South Asia is home to 1.6 billion people, and it is an emerging middle class market. So China is looking opportunity for trade investments, and that they find that this South Asia region is very important, particularly for commerce, and so China is trying to increase influence in the neighboring countries, and that instance is there. Some of the India's neighboring countries like Bangladesh was earlier, Pakistan and Nepal, they used to support that China should become the member of SAARC, where India is less interested in making China as the member of SAARC, and then because of the pressures, it is a multilateral institution. SAARC is a regional organization. So we have observed, like if there is no harm if China become gives China become a observer state in SAARC, but at the same time we try to counterbalance. We try to have Japan and America as also observer states in SAARC. So the neighboring countries, they always emphasize, they always talk about the Chinese greater involvement in the region, and where India is little hesitant about the Chinese involvement, because if it doesn't make much impact, it doesn't make much difference if Chinese comes to SAARC, because Chinese are already economically in South Asia, that Chinese goods are flooding in all South Asian markets. So why do China wants to come to SAARC? It seems that it has more geostrategic interest rather than geoeconomics joining SAARC. So this is the regional systemic pressure, where the neighboring countries, they influence the India-China relations. The third very important is the international systemic pressure, and that international systemic pressure in fact includes the superpowers and the major powers, and we are basically we are trying to today, if you are looking, we are in the unipolar world system, but of course it is going to be challenged by the emerging powers like China, and we are also trying to develop the coalitions and partnership and institutions like BRICS, where India, Brazil, China, they are coming together. Russia, we are coming together to counterbalance to Americans, as well as to protect our economic interest in the region. So in the international politics, but what is more important is that because when you are looking the map also, more important is that when we are developing closer ties, closer relations with Americans, we are trying to develop the closer strategic partnership with Americans, that Chinese do not like it. Chinese are not comfortable with increasing American influence in the region. So China is basically trying to minimize the American interest, where Americans are coming to these regions to counterbalance, to balance China in South Asia, not only in South Asia but also in Asia Pacific regions, where China is very ambitious about the resources, about the market of Asia Pacific regions. In fact, what I say, that it behaves like a middle kingdom in the neighboring countries, because of there are asymmetries in size among India and South Asia and China and Asia Pacific, Southeast Asian countries. There is asymmetry in size, economy and military, and also there had been, if you're looking, had been mistrust and differentiating threat perceptions. China and Vietnam War, we have seen Korean and Japanese are not very much comfortable with China. So you can see that international systemic pressure is very important, very significant aspect of the making the India's policy towards China and Chinese policy towards India. There are clear-cut 4 policy objectives, but policy objective, or you can say that 4 aspects that where we can analyze the India-China relations. That first thing, if you are looking from 1947 onward, India tried to develop closer relations with all Asian neighbors, Asian countries, and where China was also a very important partner. Pandit Nehru tried to develop relations through Asian Relations Conference that had been organized in 1947, and after that we tried to develop a closer ties with China, where we have signed Panchil. Panchil had been very crucial foundational principles of India-China relations, where we try to develop one kind of policies, one kind of relations based on mutual respects and coexistence. But this was breached by China in 1962 when China has attacked on India and we had to face a war, unexpected war from China in 1962. After that, we did not have very closer relations with or I can say we did not have at all any diplomatic relations with China till 1976. First time in 1976 we have started chargé d'affaires, and we have started one kind of diplomatic exchange and talks and discussions from 1976. But first visit after 1962, first visit of any prime minister had been taken place in 1988 when Rajiv Gandhi went to China visiting, and we had started engaging ourselves economically. So the one understanding has been developed, let's engage ourselves for economic interest, and that engagement has reached. You can see that today China and India has more than $72 billion trade, and where China has $46 billion surplus trade in comparison to India. So India is in trade deficit with China. So that is the engagement level of engagement had gone. We had been frequently now engaging each others, having border agreement cooperations. We are trying to develop the confidence building measures. We are signing many agreements, like in 1993, or we have signed a peace and tranquility agreements in 1993, then in 1997, then in 2005 we have signed defense cooperation agreements, and in 2011 again we had signed an agreement with China. We are having bilateral exchange meetings on apex level. Prime Minister Modi has visited to China, and Chinese president had come to India on bilateral visits, and also we are also meeting on a multilateral fora, particularly like in BRICS and like in ASEAN summits and ASEAN dialogues and all that international forums. We are meeting and we are talking about with each other. So you can see at one level that China and India had been is trying to engage themselves economically from time to time. Particularly if you are looking the trade, I have talked about that most of the trades are taking place from the maritime routes. Only $100 million trade is through the border, three border points, and particularly the Nathula has become very important border trade routes between the two countries. But it is very nominal. Particularly we are trading salt, we are some medicines and very perishable items that has been rice and these are the local products are traded through the land routes. But others are the other crucial important trades are taking place through the maritime routes. No manufacturing goods are imported through the land border routes. That all taking place through you can say from maritime routes, where the countries' interests are emerging, particularly sea lane communications, security from piracy, developing infrastructures on sea routes, where China is very keen, very strongly engaging South Asian countries or all over the world, developing ports in Myanmar it is a Sittwe port, and in Bangladesh they are trying to develop the Chittagong port, and later they had shifted, they started negotiating developing a deep sea port in Sonadia, and of course they have more than 8 billion investment in Sri Lanka in developing Hambantota ports and other airports, and also China is investing in Maldives, developing a port, and of course $46 billion investment in Gwadar port, which it would connect China, Pakistan through the disputed land, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, where this China-Pakistan economic corridor will pass, and that India has very strong objections as well as concern about this thing. So you can see that there are a strong economic engagements are taking place, significant economic engagements are taking place, different dialogues are taking place, or we are also having joint maritime dialogues and joint military exercises in Indian Ocean regions. So you can find that this kind of hand-to-hand meetings on the issues of counter-terrorism we are having, trying to develop with each other. So this is the first point that I would like to, that the India and China, we are trying to move for better economic engagements. But on the other hand, you can say because the other hand, China is more interested to maintain status quo, where India is basically is trying to have engagement not only for economic interest, because in economic engagement China is more beneficiary. China is taking more advantages of Indian economic markets by investment, by doing trades in all South Asian countries, and China is interested to maintain status quo on border issues, that they do not want to resolve the border issues, where China and India shares about 3,388 kilometers of land border. So you can see that status quo policy of China is has not been much entertained, though we are signing many agreements related to defense cooperations, border security, and or you can say in the directions of confidence building measures, but we are not in process and discussing to resolve the contentious issues in between two countries, and that that keeps India concerned about China, because there is asymmetry in military, there is asymmetry in economy. If you are looking the size of economy, China has more than $11 trillion economy, where India is having 2.2 trillions economy. So it's a very small, like you can say China has 4 times larger economy than India. So otherwise also we are also not very much comfortable about the way China is supporting the nuclear missiles programs in Pakistan, the way China is supporting the military modernizations and supplying the arms to Bangladesh and to Pakistan. They are having umbrella agreements with Bangladesh, and with defense umbrella agreements, I can say, with Bangladesh and Pakistan. So what I find that China is trying to maintain on military issues status quo with India. It doesn't have, but it is developing more engagement policy with on economic issues. So you can see the two aspects, that first China is having the engagement policy on economic issues, but China is also maintaining status quo on the border issues, and that is the policy. The two other aspects where containment policy and balance of power will discuss further. Thank you very much. So we were talking about the Chinese engagement policy, where economic interest of China is very importantly dominating India-China relations. But I said that balance of trade is in favor of China. India is trying to minimize this balance of trade, but what is happening that China, we are trying to have the bilateral free trade agreements. China is not preferring that, and the China is more talking about the multilateral free trade agreements with India. That is not going to favor. And what China is more talking about the economic terms, that we have the target to increase $100 billion trade between India and China. So you can see that economically they are engaging with India, but on military issues they are moreover maintaining status quo, except signing the agreements and you can say confidence building measures and MOUs on border issues. But what is happening in reality, whenever the Chinese Prime Minister and presidents are visiting to India, they are mobilizing sometimes 1,000 troops to the bordering areas, and sometimes they are mobilizing 100 troops to bordering areas. We have also seen in the past that the Chinese helicopters are flying on the Indian territory, particularly in the last year. We have seen that one Chinese helicopter was roaming in the Himachal Pradesh territory, and also we have seen that China has is very vigilant about the Tibet and about the Dalai Lama's visits. We have recently seen China has had strong objections when Dalai Lama, the spiritual guru of Tibet, had visited to Arunachal Pradesh, and China had given strong statements that that China will not tolerate such kind of acts of India. China is expecting us that we should have one China policy. That we had declared two important aspects during Pandit Nehru period itself in 1950, where we said that yes, we believe in one China policy, and we believe that Tibet is part of China. But on the other hand, China doesn't believe one India policy. In sometimes China is well aware that Kashmir is the integral part of India, but China is still considering a disputed land between Pakistan and India, and they have also signed a border agreements with Pakistan in 1963. They have clearly written that China, the Pakistan occupied Kashmir is a disputed land, and they have given Aksai Chin. Pakistan has given Aksai Chin to China. So China doesn't believe one China policy. And the second very important point is that whenever China, they are investing themselves in disputed land, that is Pakistan occupied Kashmir in China-Pakistan economic corridor, where India had protested strongly that this is a disputed land, you should not, China should not invest. But since China has strategic as well as economic interest in developing this economic corridor, but here you can see again China has double role when we are investing in Vietnam, particularly in South China Sea. South China Sea and in oil exploration fields, China has strong objections and says that this is a disputed region, disputed area, land. So India should not invest. So you can see that the China is having double standard on the policy of with India. They are expecting that India should follow the policy of one China, and where China is having double standard, double roles. Third policy objective is the balance of power. That has become very important, very crucial issue or aspects not only between India and China but before the international community, because what is happening exactly, this is happening that China is coming to South Asia and trying to encircle and engage by developing ports, by developing infrastructures, by developing greater engagements in the neighboring countries like Nepal, like Bangladesh, like Sri Lanka, like Pakistan, and that John Garver has given this policy, that sting of pearl policy, or and China is basically advocating this is part of one belt one road policy, or it is we are trying to revive the new maritime Silk Road between where it will connect to African countries, it would connect to the European countries. So basically what China is doing, that trying to balance India in South Asia regions in the world, and also trying to balance Americans in South Asia region, where India is also very consciously developing a strategic partnership with the Chinese neighborhood. Particularly you can see that India had developed very close relations with Japan, South Korea. We had when Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi went to Japan, where they have talked that we will promote the democratic ethos and values not only in the neighborhood but all over the world. The clear indication was from Chinese, clear indications was from Japanese prime ministers and Indian prime ministers that China and North Korea should develop the democracy in their countries. So we are basically trying to balance China in its region, and we are trying to develop the partnership with the extended neighbors in Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, all these countries in Asia Pacific regions, and in East Asia we are trying to develop the closer relations with Japan and South Korea. What most important aspects that has emerged, Modi has also discovered the Mongolia. Mongolia has been defined as third neighbor of India, where China it is bordering with China in Northeast Asia region. Mongolia is very rich in uranium. Mongolia is very rich in the energy resources, where India is trying to develop the partnership in energy sectors. India is trying to develop the partnership with Mongolia to develop better economic engagement. But indirectly or directly, you can say that it's a balance of power strategy, that where China is coming to Indian region, in South Asia region, India is counterbalancing China in its periphery, where we are developing deeper interest in the Chinese neighborhood as well as in South China Sea. and we are also investing in these regions. We are also, you can say, in Vietnam, two important aspects that has been developed. Particularly, first thing that we had promised that we will set up a BrahMos missile in Vietnam, and we'll also invest in Vietnam's energy sector. So that uncomforts China, but it is required to protect India's strategic interest, India's economic interest in Southeast Asia regions, because in Southeast Asia region, Chinese are very conscious, very alert that whosoever power like Americans are coming to Southeast Asia or India is going to Southeast Asia, Chinese they do not like. But we have been very active, particularly from 1991. We had developed a Look East policy, and that particularly after coming Modi into power, we have started acting to the Southeast Asian countries, and it has become Act East policy, where we had prioritized on three areas: culture, connectivity, and commerce. Where in culture we are trying to revive that whatever the cultural linkages with Southeast Asian countries we are having, but we are also trying to develop the physical connectivity, where two important projects had come out. First is that India, Thailand, Myanmar Trilateral road projects, where India will be connected to Thailand by road through Myanmar, and from Thailand you can access to all Southeast Asian countries. Second very important infrastructure projects, that multi-purpose projects has come, Kaladan multi-purpose projects, where India had tried to connect with Myanmar through sea routes from Kolkata port to Sitwe, and from Sitwe India will take Kaladan river to reach Indian border, and from Indian border it would go to the northeastern region. So we are trying to develop the infrastructure linkages with the Southeast Asian countries. And third is the commerce, and that is very important, because we have very significant service sector relations with Southeast Asian countries, and this uncomforts Chinese, because China has very strong interest in Singapore and in all other Southeast Asian countries, where Indians, more than 10 lakh Indians are working in Singapore, particularly in service sectors. So it is a direct challenge to the Chinese interest in the regions. But we are trying to develop our economic engagements. We are trying to develop our service sector engagements with the Southeast Asian countries, and we targets that India and Southeast Asian countries should have more than $100 billion trade. So you can see that this increasing interest in the Southeast Asian regions are not very acceptable to Chinese in their periphery. What my point is that we are trying to balance each other in each other's territory, in each other's regions, where Chinese are coming to South Asia and Indians are going to Southeast Asian countries. Of course, we are two emerging powers. We are two emerging Asian neighbors, where the other neighboring, our neighborhoods are very crucial, very important to become the Asian power, to become the regional power. If they do not cooperate us on trade, they do not cooperate us on security issues, and they do not provide us conducive environment, that would certainly hamper the India's interest in the region and Chinese interest in the region. Fourth important point is the containment policy. Particularly this containment policy, if you are talking that we have heard during the Cold War period, John Foster Dulles has talks about the containment of USSR, containment of of communism, and that policy, it has become very popular policy. But of course, the containment it comes moreover in the context of nuclear deterrence and nuclear containment. China is a nuclear power, and we were developing our nuclear programs from 1974 onwards. We tried to develop our nuclear policy, and in 1998 we had successfully tested our nuclear programs. So that we try to develop the deterrence of Chinese nuclear threat, developing our nuclear arsenal or nuclear program. So you can say that it is a containment policy, that we were having threats from the Himalayan regions, but how other way we are containing China, that India has developed a strong world-class naval force, that India is having exercise with Australia, naval exercise with Australia, with Americans. We are having naval exercise with Russians. We have developed very high technique, high advanced submarine systems in the Indian Ocean region. We have also, because it's very important, the Indian Ocean region is very busy trade route for the international community. So and there is threat to this trade through the maritime route. So we from pirates and all that. So we had developed very strong sea lane communications. We had developed the anti-piracy mechanisms, so that how we can contain ourselves in the Indian regions. But what is more further, that to counterbalance the Chinese nuclear threat in the Himalayan regions, we are trying to modernize the military bases in Andaman Nicobar, and we had set up a stable aircrafts in Andaman Nicobar, and it is calculated, you can say, that in case there is a threat from China, from the Himalayan regions, we are in position to disrupt the Chinese energy trade. That 90% energy trades takes place from Malacca Strait. Malacca Strait is bordering with Singapore, with Philippines, with Malaysia, with Thailand, and 90% of this energy trades of China takes place from this route. So in case there is any threat from China, we are having stable aircrafts in Andaman Nicobar, and that is on the mouth of the Malacca Strait. We are in position to disrupt the Chinese trade, and that what Chinese Prime Minister called it. It's a Malacca dilemma. So you can see this containment policy, where we are trying to develop the alliances and partnership with the international communities. India has signed about strategic partnership agreements with 39 countries in the world, and we are also developing very closer strategic partnership with the Americans. That is also part of counterbalancing China in the regions. Because if you are looking all these entire scenario between India and China, and the policy aspects of these two, where engagements is on economic aspects, status quo on the border aspects, balance of power in each other's regions, and containment policy. What is the track records that you can engage yourself with China, but how you can trust China? Because whatever they are developing today, they are giving the arguments that we are developing ports, but it is the ports are developed for geo-economic interest. They argues that we have 1.3 billion people, and to feed 1.3 billion people, to sustain our economy, we have to ensure the constant supply of energy from different sources. And for this region, China is having one belt, one road policy. And for this region, China is developing ports and infrastructure all over the countries, and there is nothing with the geo-strategic, there is nothing with the with the military intentions regarding these ports. But you never believe, because you believed on when we signed Panchsheel, and in the Panchsheel it was signed that we will respect each other's territorial integrity, we will not interfere in internal affairs, and we had faced a war in 1962. So India is very conscious about Chinese whole engagement policy, because what is visible today, if China and India's relations, that China is not cooperating with us on many significant, many crucial issues, particularly in recent past. We are trying to become the member of nuclear supplier group, where China is not cooperating, China is not helping us, and because of China, we haven't become yet the member of the nuclear supplier group, because China is understood if India will become the member of nuclear supplier group, India will be in better position to develop its nuclear arsenal, nuclear programs and nuclear energy, and that would obviously compete, that would balance Chinese nuclear programs in future. So China is very hesitant, very reluctant to help us on the nuclear supplier group. Second very important incidents that India is suffering from terrorism, particularly the Pakistan-grown terrorism, and Azhar Masood is the terrorist, where UN wanted to declare him a international terrorist, where China did not support this proposal, and China said there is no substantial evidences, there is no strong evidences where Azhar Masood could be declared a terrorist, international terrorist. So this kind of Chinese attitude on these crucial issues are very much alerts to the international community, to India, that we have to be very conscious when we are engaging, we are signing any kind of agreements with China, and that, because why China and the other way, what China is expecting us, that we should cooperate them in their one belt, one road policy. We should cooperate. Why we do not sign China, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar economic corridors, and they are giving different routes, that either we will come from the northeastern regions to Assam, Ledo, and then it enters to Bangladesh, and then Chittagong ports. They are giving one route. Then they are giving the middle path, and then they are giving this south path. They are basically trying to bypass India. From Yunnan, they are planning to come to Myanmar, and from Myanmar they are planning to come to Bangladesh. But it doesn't serve their interest. If they are coming just to Bangladesh, they can come through the sea routes. Basic intention of China is to have better access to the northeastern region, where China claims the Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet, and that was disputed. Recently they have changed the 5 places name in Chinese. They are situated in Arunachal Pradesh, but they have changed from their calendar, and they have said that it is a routine matter, and we have changed it as part of the census. So as part of the standardization. So we have changed the name, but somehow in their subconscious, the South Tibet, what they called our Arunachal Pradesh, is in their calculations. Their intentions are not very clear about this region. So we have to be very clear that what extent we can cooperate with Chinese to helping them in their developing their infrastructures, bring them to Bangladesh, bring them to Myanmar and Nepal. So India has to develop a greater engagement policy with the neighboring countries, so that Chinese can remain remain away from the South Asian periphery. You can see basically that Modi governments, that because the Modi paradigm in Chinese policy, that in election manifesto itself, that economic development and transformation, that is all inclusive, and need to do more with neighbors. It is a clear indications that we will try to minimize the increasing Chinese influence from the neighboring countries. Particularly, we will develop economic partnership, and we will transform the entire South Asia regions that would be more inclusive. And of course, the second important, you can see that joint session of the parliament where Pranab Mukherjee was addressing and talks that we will develop better engagements, better relations with Eastern South Asia sub-regions, because what Eastern South Asia sub-region constitute Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and that where Chinese are having deeper interest in these regions, but we have given priority to them. And what Modi further did, that Modi had invited all these people in their oath taking, head of the states of all South Asian countries in their oath taking ceremony, and that has been given a clear cut indications that there are scope, at least the neighboring countries are having minimum cooperations on at regional level. So that kind of clear cut message had been given to China, that China cannot have, but still because of the domestic political instabilities, because of the different political constituencies in the neighboring countries, the Chinese are entertained by the opposition's anti-Indian forces in the neighboring countries. But what is important is that, of course, China has a huge you can say reserves, foreign reserves for the investment. It is more about $3.5 trillion foreign reserves they have, and that is very lucrative, very attractive to the neighboring countries, including India. And China is asking that we will invest in your countries for your infrastructure developments, for your economic developments. But what is happening? The Chinese are giving the soft loans to the neighboring countries, but these soft loans are very on high interest rate, number one. Number two, these investments, whatever the investments are coming, these investments are developing dependencies on China, either in India or in Pakistan or in Bangladesh. What they are doing, that they are coming with the capital, they are coming with the technologies, they are coming with the machines, and what they are asking that our technologies, our capitals, our machines cannot be operated by your engineers, so our engineers will also come, and our engineers cannot communicate with the local labor forces, so our laborers will also come. So what the Chinese are coming with their engineers, with laborers, machines, capitals, that is developing a systematic dependencies on China for the long term, and that would not benefit. Second important point is that where China is investing. China is investing where Chinese has the interest. They are not investing where the particular nation has the interest. Like in case of India, China is more interested to invest in northeastern region. China is more interested to invest in Mumbai port, because Mumbai port is very close to our naval base. China is developing ports and ports and on the maritime routes and all that, because it interests to China. We are asking that better you invest to develop the rail connectivity, freight and rail corridors from Delhi to Chennai or Delhi to Mumbai, but Chinese are not interested. You can see our government wanted to that let Chinese invest in Gujarat, but they did not. They were more interested in developing investments in the northeastern regions. So point is that there is a very clear-cut intention that why China is coming to India, why China is increasing greater engagements enhancing greater engagement with India, because China has very deep geostrategic and geoeconomic interest in India and in South Asia, because China is aspiring to become the world power, and China is aspiring to dominate all over the world and to contain USA in all the sectors. That has been very successful in Africa, that has become very successful in Southeast Asia, and trying to become successful in South Asia. But India has been successfly containing China in this region. So this is the submission that we have to frame a very constructive, very conscious policy once we are dealing with China. Thank you very much for hearing this.
Dear friends, due to paucity of time, we have to stop our lecture here. On that note, we would like to thank Professor Bharadwaj for coming to our show and delivering this wonderful lecture. And thank you, dear friends, for watching our show. Stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you.